Hey, I'm Rachel,
And I'm Amanda, and this is Beyond a Ballot.
powered by DoorDash. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond a Ballot. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Rachel.
Okay, big week this week. So this week we thought that the two of us would just break down for everybody everything that happened. And we were just making a list of all the things we have to talk about. And there's about 45,000 different things that took place since we last spoke to you last week. Okay, this has been a really big week for your team, for the Liberals. You were on the ground. I'm just diving in because we have so many things to break down. But you were on the ground in Ottawa last Sunday for Mark Carney's big win. And I thought maybe we can start there. What was it like to be there? How did it feel?
Well, I think it was a little bittersweet. You know, the last time I had been to a major convention was when Trudeau won the leadership.
Right.
So we're talking, like 12 years later. Obviously, I've been to a lot of election victory parties and seen a lot of people, but it's been a long time since we've had a leadership race. And so
Mm-hmm.
being in the room was like a big reunion for a lot of Liberals. There was a real excitement, which, fair. It hasn't been that exciting to be a Liberal in the last little while.
No kidding.
So there was a lot of excitement in the room. It was palpable. You could feel it in the air. And that was great because I think the party needed that injection of positivity and optimism and excitement for the future. It was bittersweet because obviously we were also saying goodbye to Trudeau as prime minister, to a team that has helped lead the Liberal Party through three successive election victories. So a formidable team despite, the challenges of the last year. So saying goodbye and then saying hello to Carney in a real informal way. There were a few big takeaways. One of them was the audible gasp in the room when Freeland only took 8% of the vote. Honestly, the room was like this.
That's crazy. But
Yeah.
also I think the country collectively went because she played such a big role in this whole story.
Yeah.
And so to see her get such a little okay, but I'm going to just interject with a theory though. My theory on that, and Karina Gould also not doing as well as many people thought she would, is that there was 400,000 people that signed up to vote. They ended up with
Mhm.
about 160,000 that actually ended up voting. And I think what we were seeing over the course of the leadership campaign was that the polls were saying if Mark Carney's in, you guys could take government in the next election. And so I think there was a lot of Liberals that potentially supported Karina Gould and Chrystia Freeland that kind of decided not to show up because they also wanted the team to win. And that's what the polls were saying, that it had to be a
Mhm.
Carney kind of coronation. And so the fact that he took such a big share of the vote and that they did so poorly, in my mind, can be very easily accounted for by the fact that there was terrible turnout and anyone who turned out basically voted for Carney. So just to
Yeah,
give them a little boost, those two women.
Mhm. I mean, maybe if Chrystia Freeland had done the podcast.
Yeah, right? I know. Maybe if she'd come on and talk to us, then our community would have supported her. But yeah, I think there was more to it than them. Like, I think it was more about Liberals rallying around Mark Carney because they saw opportunity to win a general election more so than not supporting these two women, in my
For
mind.
sure. For sure. And I think so it was really Carney's night. It felt like it from beginning to end. There were a lot of Carney signs being held by people in the room. So if you even just took a cursory glance of the room, you had a good sense of who was going to win.
Right.
There were some big speeches. Probably people have seen the clips of Ella Grace Trudeau, who introduced her father, and then Mark Carney's daughter, Cleo, who introduced him. And that was kind of neat because it was like these young women
Yeah.
who were so truly so poised and delivered excellent speeches to introduce their fathers. And, it had that feeling of like, it's the next chapter, it's the turning of the tides. And so again, it was bittersweet. But there was some wonderful excitement at the end of that evening when honestly the crowd was erupting with enthusiasm around this Carney victory. And with that was this glimmer of hope which is now more than a glimmer, that the Liberals could win the next general election.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're going to get into that in a second. And
Yeah.
I don't even have the brain power from this week to even comprehend what's happened. But for when you were listening to Ella Grace, did it feel in the room at all a little bit sad? Because, Justin Trudeau has been there for so
Hmm.
long. He's going
Hmm.
off and doing, I don't know what he's going to do now, but he's split from his wife, and really his other son, Xavier, wasn't there. It was his two
Hmm.
kids with him. And I felt sad that like Sophie Gregoire Trudeau couldn't even come and like support him in his last moments of being prime minister. She ended up writing something on Instagram like 2 days later, but still, I felt sad for him a little bit. Don't tell my conservative friends.
I mean, he was very well supported in the room.
Mm.
Um, there was a lot of, there were many speeches of gratitude. I think that he went out on a high note. He had obviously really taken a pummeling over the last 12 months for sure, and I think it was fitting for a person who's brought in three successive election victories to go out on a high note. And he did. There were tributes from former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. Mark Carney had strong words to say, and I thought that Trudeau's parting speech was nothing but gracious. It was really a handover, but it was also just a reminder to Canadians of the role that we all play in everything that is happening now. It was one of those hope and hard work type speeches that got him elected in the first place. And I really did think that they hit the right note on that night.
Let's talk about that Jean Chrétien tribute, because so many people were
Mm.
saying, what a strategic move for the Liberals to bring out Jean Chrétien, who
Hmm.
was such a beloved Liberal prime minister. The
Yeah.
party loved him. One of the things I was thinking, he's 91 years old. There was one step
Yes.
on the stage. I don't know if you saw this live, but when we were watching, and at the end, he went to take that step and he kind of had to do a running start to get over the step. And I was thinking, why didn't somebody walk him over the step? But he made it. He made it. And he also delivered quite a speech. He's a hilarious guy. I think, have I told the story about him and I being in an earthquake together on the
No,
pod
tell
before?
tell
Oh,
again, tell.
I was at the Rideau Club in Ottawa having lunch, and there all of a sudden the
Mm.
chandeliers started shaking. And really, Jean Chrétien was at the table next to me, and we both look at each other, and the two of us are under the table because we both were like, "It's an earthquake!" Being a British Columbian, I'm so crazy about it. And yeah, we survived together, and he is hilarious. He's very, very funny in real life. He was cracking jokes even as we were surviving this massive quake. But 91 still going, and what a great idea to bring him out for that and really try and
Yeah.
rally the troops.
He was his speech was like equal parts, powerful and motivating, and also at times really funny.
Yeah.
And he had the crowd going. I really do think it was a smart and strategic move. I also think he represents something in the Liberal Party that
Hmm.
stands for kind of the best of the party. And I
Yes.
thought those values really percolated to the top in everything that everyone was saying. A reminder, too, of like, and sometimes I even forget, this is the part you're going to hate this. You're going to hate what I have to say now, but I'm going to do it. I mean, you could have a conservative moment also. Um, but the party of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the party of the Canadian flag, like there were moments where they were touching on these historical references on the things that really made Canada Canada and Canadians Canadians, and the values that the party has really kind of rested on over the course of the last several decades. And I think at some times has lost a little bit of its luster because we're in such a divisive stage in politics where we sometimes forget about, who we are, what it means to be Canadian. And I think these times through the Trump tariffs have reminded us that we have to get back to those core values. And so much of that was present in that night. And honestly, no matter what party you're part of, obviously that's a very big part of what we all need to believe right now. But I thought the party did a very good job of reminding Canadians, or sorry, reminding Liberals where we came from, the roots, the things that got us here, and what we need to stand on in the next election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting insight because especially where we are right now, where the
Hmm.
new leader coming in, there's a lot of talk that he's moving the Liberals to the center, and the Liberals
Right.
are are a party that have held government the most in this country, but
Hmm.
they're very adaptable. So
Hmm.
conservatives have those core values, the NDP has those core values, and liberals kind of change with successive governments based on like issues of the day. And that's part of who they are as kind of the centrist party in Canada. With Mark Carney, it's really, I think, changing. And even when we talk
Yeah.
about today with his new cabinet and the way that he
Hmm.
did transition, there's a lot of talk about how you define a Mark Carney liberal. And I think that that's going to be very different from a Justin Trudeau liberal. But
Hmm.
ultimately, the liberals and, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, was very good at honing in on this concept of liberalism in Canada. A lot of in the United States, they have the um, what do they call them? Department of Finance, and we have Finance Canada, and like Pierre
Hmm.
Trudeau really labeled and branded this concept of
Yeah.
liberalism in Canada. And so it kind of felt like that, like watching that old uh raw
Yes.
Canadiana back in the
Totally.
day liberalism when looking at that. And then
Hmm.
and once Mark Carney won and got on the stage and talked about how he's getting rid of the carbon tax and
Hmm.
various other things, it was like, okay, well, this is where they were, and this is kind of passing the torch between Jean Chrétien to Justin Trudeau, and now they're in this new era of Mark
Hmm.
Carneyism. And so what does that mean for liberals?
There was a takeaway in this speech for me, and I agree. I think that if we can think about it like more traditionally center, I think that's true of what he's hoping to achieve. He said very clearly, and I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write this down, but this is about, or the times require, but also I think really liberalism to him is about being good stewards of the economy. And he obviously has that economic background while still really caring about people and how they're doing. And I thought that that shone through in his speech, this idea that we care about our neighbors, that we take care of one another. Um, but we can't, set the house on fire to do it. We can't sacrifice the books. We have to be strong stewards of the economy. And I think that that will present a new challenge for the conservatives who have really hammered on that point, successfully hammered on
Mm-hmm.
that point for the last, year, 18 months, 24 months.
But here's the challenge that Mark Carney's going to face. And this is kind of what Justin Trudeau faced in 2015 is, that's what liberals run on, this idea that they
Yeah.
are the economic brain, but the everybody heart in
Mhm.
policy making. And Justin Trudeau did that with a lot of different policies. At the time he was talking
Mhm.
about a big one that comes to mind is like democratic reform and how we elect people. That never came to be. And so the challenge that I think Mark Carney will have is being able to say, yes, we are the economic backbone, but the heart of helping everybody. But playing that out once he gets into office and now that he's prime
Mhm.
minister, because I think one of the biggest challenges with this liberal leader and this prime minister is that he never has held elected office.
Mhm.
And, he's building a team around him. Marco Mendicino, we can talk
Mhm.
about in a second, has come in as chief of
Yep.
staff, which to me was a very interesting idea. But that's a guy that's run and he's been elected, and that's
Mhm.
probably something that Mark Carney is trying to learn about from Marco Mendicino. So um, let's talk about the first week. What were your
Okay.
thoughts? He not him as prime minister. He was prime minister designate. And if any of you
Yes.
listened last week, you'll remember my theory is that he was going to go to the polls this past Monday. He was never actually going to become prime minister, but we're now at taping about 5 hours into his prime ministerialship.
Yeah.
And so how was the first week? What did he get up to? And as a Liberal, how are you feeling that with having him as the new leader?
I mean, listen, we're all looking at the same polls,
Mm-hmm.
and the polls have shown this, this gap that has existed for some time between the conservatives and the liberals has essentially closed. Some polls have the conservatives a point ahead. Some polls have the liberals a point ahead. Any way you look at it, this is a very, very close race. And that is in no small part to Mark Carney deciding to run for leader and becoming leader, and because of the conditions that we find ourselves in, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So this first week, what did we see? We saw, some pretty glowing reviews and news articles, and some not so glowing reviews and news articles. Because when you get into office, right, when you take the chair, you're then subject to, I think, a type of criticism that you're not as subject to when you're just running for leader. So now it's like it's wide open. I think on the day of the convention, Pierre Poilievre was also at his own rally. I believe it was in London, and he had some choice words for Carney because, of course, the Conservative Party is now going to, pivot, recalibrate, and focus their attention on Carney and Carney's Liberal Party. But this is a week of transition. So this week we spent a lot of time speculating who would be in his inner circle, who would be in his new cabinet. He moved relatively quickly. There was a lot of speculation that he could be sworn in as early as Friday, and that's exactly what happened. And we believe that he's being sworn in so that he can get the house in order so that he can go to the polls really quickly also. So I'm sure we're going to talk about cabinet in a moment, but that was really the focus, I would say, of this week.
Can we talk about PMO staffing though? Because
Yeah.
okay, for context, Marco Mendicino
Hmm.
is an MP. Did he resign
Yep.
already?
No,
Oh,
he's an MP.
he's still an MP, but he's also serving as chief of staff to the prime minister. I'm not
Hmm.
sure that's ever happened before, has it? I
I
don't
don't
think so.
know. I mean, you would know. You would know
I
better than I would know.
it was like, whoa, I thought that's an interesting move. And so I don't know the personal relationship between Marco Mendicino and Mark Carney. My only thoughts, like I said, are that Marco said he wasn't going to run again, I believe,
Right.
previously. He's the former Attorney General of Canada. He has run in, I believe, 2 or 3 elections. And he's a former Crown prosecutor. So he's got maybe some of that communication on the same level as Mark Carney. Like he's a lawyer.
Yep.
They're able to work well together. But the thing for me is really is Marco Mendicino in there because he has been elected, and that's really what Mark Carney is trying to learn. So it's not easy to come in as a newly elected person. It's especially not easy to come in as an newly elected prime minister. Um,
Hmm.
to, to clarify, though, he is not elected. He does not hold a seat. If the House were
No.
to sit today, Mark Carney would not have a seat in it, even though he is the sitting prime minister. Um, or the current prime minister, I guess he's not sitting.
No.
And yeah, this is all, I mean, for a nerd like me who loves parliamentary procedure in the House, this is just wild. And so,
Yeah.
like, obviously, we're anticipating an election call probably next
Hmm.
weekend, if not the
Yeah.
end of next week. But this could play out where the House would come back and he would have to find a seat to run in. There's a by
Hmm.
election that's been called in Halifax for April
Hmm.
14th. Unlikely that Mark Carney would sit there, but a lot of the narrative this week was where would he get
Yeah.
a seat? Where
Totally.
he's from the Northwest Territories. He grew up in
Hmm.
Edmonton. I have to see
Hmm.
if I can even keep track because he has so many addresses in this country. He now lives, I believe, outside of Ottawa. And he like where do you run when you have that resume? I don't know. Any
I think there's
insights?
a couple of things. I think that the House won't resume.
Yes.
That's all the speculation we have, is that it's not going to resume. He is going to go to the polls. He is going to seek that mandate from Canadians. I think
Hmm.
it's the right thing to do. I think it's the
Yes.
only thing to do. I think given the times that we're in, given his new leadership, it makes perfect sense. He should head to the polls. And given the position that the party's in, frankly, he should head to the
Yeah.
polls. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to give the conservatives too much time. Give
Right.
them too much
But
rope,
that's a
and what
good
happens?
point. That's a good point too, though, because the conservatives have raised a ton of money. They are great
Yes.
fundraisers. They are great
Yes.
messengers. And as soon as the writ is dropped, as soon as the election is called, then every party is bound by an election budget. So the
Right.
minute that election is called, they have to stop spending as much money, as do the Liberals, as do the NDP. But because the Conservatives have so much money, that's a threat to the Liberals. And many people have seen, and I've heard complaining about the number of Conservative attack ads that are playing on TVs right now. I actually haven't seen that many. So, but I was listening to the radio today, and people are calling in saying every single ad is Mark Carney. So it's working. But I think the Liberals would probably want it to stop as soon as possible.
For sure. I mean, it's like a license to print money right now, right? It's like they are putting out, they can spend as much as they want until the writ
Mm-hmm.
drops.
Right.
So the
As can
liberals
any
want to,
party.
as can any party. So
Yeah.
the liberals are going to want to slow that machine down as quickly as possible. But I think obviously the bigger reason to go to the polls is twofold: the party's position currently, and also because when you are elected the leader, the way that Mark Carney was elected leader, there's a lot of criticism that only 160,000 people elected him leader. Of course, it doesn't work that we elect our prime ministers, which you often tell our listeners. We elect a party, and that is why
Yes.
Mark Carney is the current prime minister. But going to the polls is seeking the mandate from Canadians directly. So that's that.
I
Oh, go
can I
ahead.
also interject one other thing. I think in the strategy room at the Liberal in the Liberal Party is that they're thinking, I mean, we didn't see a lot of Mark Carney in the last couple of weeks of the leadership
Mm,
campaign. He didn't do a lot of media. He was doing well in
hmm
the polls, and like that is typically where you pull your candidate. You don't want them to say anything or do anything that would jeopardize that what looks like a major win, which turned out to be. I think Canadians this week also, though, a big narrative that came out was, who is Mark Carney? I mean, now he's
mm,
our new prime minister, but
hmm
Canadians know very little about him other than the fact that that he has an economic background. He was the Bank of Canada governor at some point, Bank of England governor. But I think people really want to get to know him better. And so
hmm
there's a lot of risk in putting him into the House and having him play out in a forum, an elected forum, like sitting in the House that he's never been in before. And there's a lot of risk in the Conservatives being able to define him before he's able to define himself. And so I think one of the key calculations, just on the political side, for going to the polls so quickly is Canadians seem to be interested in this guy. They're not really sure who he is. Let's not let him mess anything up before Canadians have a chance to give this guy a mandate. And I think that's a lot of what the Liberals are thinking
For
also.
sure. I mean, the conservatives have been, and we've talked about this so many times, so effective
Mm-hmm.
at defining the issue of the day, positioning themselves vis-a-vis the government, and that has worked out in their favor. So when you have a strong communications machine,
Yes.
you are not going to play with that. You do not want the time to elapse where they can define your candidate for you, or they can define your leader for you. So it's also imperative that the Liberal Party come out with some of their own ads. Liberal Party, if you're listening,
Spend this week. Do they
spend,
have any
spend,
money
spend.
left after this leadership race? I don't know. That was quite
They
a
have
big
more
party.
money that the Liberal Party is enjoying the
A
biggest
boost.
fundraising quarter that they have had, I think, in like years. So
Yeah.
they have money to spend also.
For context, when there's a leadership race, candidates actually raise money for their
Hmm
campaigns, and a lot of that goes back into the party. It's the
hmm
same with a by-election. Like parties love to raise money off of by-elections because you can raise money that then can be used during a federal
hmm
campaign.
hmm
So the leadership is expensive, leadership race, but also it's an opportunity to fundraise. So they've done better this last couple of weeks. And now a word from our title sponsor, DoorDash. Just like we go beyond a ballot, DoorDash goes beyond delivery. DoorDash is committed to providing flexibility for Dashers. A couple of weeks ago, we heard from Dasher Nadia about how she's able to be her own boss and work on her own schedule. Here's more from Nadia on how dashing with DoorDash helps her keep earning when she's away from home.
My parents are a little bit older now. I went for a full month in Quebec City, and while I was there with my parents for a longer time, for a month, I was able to work as if I was working in Cambridge and make no difference in my income. It's stress-free because I could go visit my parents and I'm not stressed about, okay, I'm gonna have to ask my employer. All that stress is out. You're really your home boss.
Okay, let's dive into, let's fast forward. Okay, he gets through the first week. We saw him meet with Premier Doug Ford at one point, who, by the way, is killing it this week. Doug Ford getting an invitation to come to DC. So shout out to him. The Premier of Ontario was asked to come and meet with Secretary Lutnick to talk about the tariffs and seems to be leading the charge here. He brought along with him Dominique LeBlanc and Minister Champagne to have these, what he's calling, very good discussions. So that all, just going back to this week, kind of plays well also that we seem to be making a little bit of progress in the tariff department to the first week of Carney. But that took place yesterday, Thursday. Today, this morning, we wake up. We see everybody at Rideau Hall. A lot of speculation on cabinet. Was this what you thought was going to happen? I actually thought it was going to be a smaller cabinet. He's cut down, I think, 20 cabinet ministers. But at the same time, I was hoping he'd go really small, like 15. I think he ended up with 24. What did you think? What did you think was going to happen?
26, I think.
26. Okay.
Was it 26 or 24? It may have been 24.
I thought it was.
So much has happened this week. I can't remember the numbers. One note on Ford before we get into this. So here's another interesting character, right? Who will play a big role in the federal election story that we will cover. This is a conservative premier who went to the polls recently, won a majority, did meet with Mark Carney this week, had nothing but glowing reviews of Mark Carney, basically said he was an economic powerhouse. Rumor has it that he's not the biggest fan of Pierre Poilievre. How will this popular premier, Ontario premier, play a role in the election? And is it possible that this conservative premier will help to get the Liberal Party of Canada reelected for a fourth mandate? That is the question.
Yeah, Doug Ford's a wild card. I will say on the conservative rumor mill, I haven't heard that they don't actually like each other. I have heard that they have tried to play in their own lanes so that, like, in 2021, Doug Ford was not super popular in Ontario during the federal election, and he tried to stay away from Poilievre so that there wasn't some kind of issue there, liability for Poilievre. I don't know that they don't like each other, but they definitely have not been besties, although they're politically aligned. And now you're right, that question kind of shifts as we see Doug Ford really killing it on the national leadership scene. I don't know. I going toe to toe, I think that Dougie would come out for Poilievre at the end of the day. I really do.
See, let's all watch.
Yeah, we're all obviously we're all watching. Captain Canada.
Captain Canada, where do you stand?
Yeah.
So anyways, back to cabinet. Here's what I thought. Few things that I think were interesting.
And by the way, it is 24. 24. I was right.
It is 24.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Of course you're right. You know these things. Like,
I know.
You always
it's in the back of my mind. I know.
So you're
I'm nerdy.
And you are. I love that about you. It's one of my guys. It's one of my favorite things about Rachel.
Oh, thank you.
I call her for process questions all the time,
and I love it.
Don't I?
Call me anytime for a process question. There's nothing I love more.
I do. Okay. So on cabinet, few things. It's a transition cabinet.
Right. They could sit for a week.
They could sit for a week. And
Likely.
I think that it was probably the best move when it comes to transition because he kept some key players in place, people who have played a critical role in the US negotiations at a time when we're going to the polls, likely going to the polls. I think it matters a lot that we have the right people that can continue to work those kind of like shadow roles. So Melanie Joly maintained her role. Francois Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance, so an important and strong role. He played obviously a big role in the Trudeau cabinet.
I just have to ask, how can he put in Chrystia Freeland and not Karina Gould? Why is Chrystia Freeland in that cabinet?
So I don't know because I'm not Mark Carney.
Here's my
But
thinking. But here's my thinking as a political analyst. Like,
okay, tell me.
if you have Chrystia Freeland, who was really the bomb that exploded this whole thing, she was the deputy prime minister. Mark Carney's message going forward, going into this election, is going to be, I'm different than Justin Trudeau. I'm a new government. Why do you, of all the ministers that you have, and you cut down by almost half, do you include the deputy prime minister under Justin Trudeau, the person who went along with all of these fiscal policies that you're now trying to tell Canadians that you're going to erase, like the carbon tax? Why do you keep Stephen Guilbeault, a minister who openly said he would resign from cabinet at one point because if they ever got rid of the carbon tax, if you're trying to change the channel on the Justin Trudeau government? This is what I can't understand. They've made such interesting headway this week, and there was talk of Christy Clark coming in at some point. There was talk of Jean Charest, both of whom are more conservative, and being included in the Carney team. We're still waiting to see what pans out with that. I'm told Charest actually said no, but why then would you not get rid of some of those key players that were counter to the image that you're trying to put forward to Canadians?
Well, I think for two reasons. One, this is the same caucus, so there will other people will be brought in, like a Charest, like maybe it could be brought in as an advisor, obviously not in cabinet. Or Christy Clark may run in the next election, and she could be somebody to look for in cabinet. But I think again, when you're in a transition, less is more right now. Less change is better. We're in the center of the biggest negotiations that affect Canadians' lives right now. The last thing you need is to throw a bomb in the middle of cabinet and watch out for where the shrapnel goes. You have to keep some degree of consistency as we go through this next period. Guilbeault moved to another portfolio. Freeland, clearly a demotion. She went from deputy prime minister and finance minister to minister of transport. So again, whatever she did, she's in a worse position than she was a few months ago. But that's on her. But I think, other people, I think it would have been ludicrous to move people like Dominic LeBlanc, who has a relationship in the US, Melanie Joly, Francois Philippe Champagne. These are people that you want in their roles. This is the consistency and stability that you need right now for the next couple of weeks until we head into a federal election. Then go bananas once you have a whole new crop of people to deal with. I will say, I was disappointed that Karina Gould wasn't there.
Yes.
Carney team, but I understand that part of it was to have a experienced cabinet,
but
smaller but experienced.
She was House leader, and she did a pretty good job.
Fair.
I also think here's the other issue, though. When you're going into a campaign and you get rid of half of your ministers, and those ministers are now running on your team, they're probably not super stoked on you. And that's another issue.
Yeah.
Like,
it's true.
People that yesterday were ministers, then they have this leadership change, and all of a sudden half of those inner circle are now out.
Yeah.
Also not a strategic move.
All right. Well, let's dive into some of the other names that came up on that list for cabinet. Who were you surprised to see on it, and who were you surprised to see off of it?
Ooh, such a good question. I was surprised to see Karina Gould off of it.
Yeah, same.
We love Karina. She's been on our pod, and I would have liked to have seen. She was like, she was kind of this dark horse candidate in the leadership bid. I think everyone, nobody expected her to win, but they certainly thought this was her kind of her bid for next time. She had a lot of enthusiasm behind her. I think she represented kind of this like new wave of liberals, sort of a young mom who's doing it all. And I was really surprised that she was left off.
But
Really
also,
surprised.
she also in the debates like really tried to bring back, just going back to what we were talking about with what is a liberal today, like she really tried to bring that back at it, saying we're not conservative light, we are actually liberals. And I applauded her in a previous episode for saying stuff like that. So I wonder if that helped her or hurt her in this situation. Although
it just seemed like an odd miss to not have somebody who represents this kind of like swath of the party. She had a lot of young liberals involved as well, who I'm sure will be a little turned off or peeved off that she's not in cabinet. But again, this has been sort of coined the transition cabinet to get through the next short while. So we may see another big change, if they were to form government again, and likely would see another big change.
Yeah. So just going back here to my earlier comments about the fact that Carney's going to try and really distance himself from the Trudeau government. I look at this list and I say, okay, we have Dominique LeBlanc. I understand why he's there. Melanie Joly, Champagne, great. Those are the ones that are dealing with Donald Trump in the United States. People like Bill Blair, Patty Hyduke, Jonathan Wilkinson, Stephen Guilbeault, Chrystia Freeland. That is Justin Trudeau's front bench. Why, if you're Mark Carney, do you bring them back? Like, why not put in people that aren't the people that Canadians have been looking at in the House for 9 years or 10 years?
I think because it's a transition cabinet, there was a desire to keep it small and to keep it experienced. I don't know that you want to test drive a bunch of new ministers in light of the environment that we're in right now. I think it's like, keep it steady, keep it as rock solid as possible. There's some major decisions being made, massive negotiations happening south of the border. And I think the idea was to keep it as tight as possible with people who have actually been in the chair, who know how to do the job. I don't think it'll stay that way. I think that if he forms government, he will make some of those bigger changes. But this to me made a lot of sense given the climate that we're in right now.
So I was sad to see some really good ministers left off, including my dear friend, Terry Beach, who has been such an...
Shout out to Terry.
Shout out to Terry. Our politics don't align, but I love him anyways. He was Minister of Citizen Services. He did a phenomenal job in that portfolio. I got a passport much faster than we had seen in previous years. But I think there's a lot of people that were left off that list. Going back to your point, though, the question is, how long will this cabinet stand? Could we see this cabinet in place for like 10 days? Which is
exactly
pretty
wild.
That's
what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
That we're going to get the call probably around the 23rd of March, just before the House is supposed to resume.
Yeah, this is the big question.
Could be a very short serving.
Is your money on the 23rd? Because this is the $1 million question. My money, for the record, is solidly on the 23rd. They need the runway to position themselves. They need the runway to get ready. That means the Conservatives and the opposition parties have a few more days to spend. What do you think? What's your money on?
I think the 23rd. Jagmeet Singh, did you see him yesterday or a couple of days ago? He was out and he was talking about maybe backing the government if they were to do some stuff for workers. And I thought, there's no way they're making that deal.
Too
no
late.
Way.
Sorry, Jagmeet.
Too late. Sorry, Jagmeet.
God.
And this is kind of this last ditch effort by the NDP, who have really seen their numbers plummet in the last few weeks, heading into what will likely be a federal election. So that was not surprising to me that he made that gesture.
Yes.
But I don't see them taking that. I see them going to the polls as soon as possible. And the 23rd makes sense. It's right before the House is supposed to come back, but still gives them, 10 days to to prepare and to get their own house in order internally. And I imagine that's a little bit of the time that they would like, just to get up to speed, to get briefed, to get up and running before they head into a federal election.
Yeah, let's dive in for our last few minutes here about the opposition parties, because you're right. The NDP, and I said this on TV the other night, like, where is Jagmeet Singh? Why isn't he pulling any media? He's been doing stuff. Like, he's coming out. He's asked for the House to come back. He made tried to make a deal with the Liberals. Nothing is sticking. And I don't know why. And I think, Carney is trying to position himself as a more centrist Liberal because he wants to pull support from the Conservatives. On the other end of that, there's a lot of people that were saying, I'm never going to vote for Justin Trudeau, so I will hold my nose and vote for the NDP in this election. And those people are now seeing Carney as a potential vote. Like, they want to vote for him. So a lot of people are looking at the polls and saying the Conservatives are going down. What we're not really looking at is just how the NDP support is tanking and how that's helping the Liberals. I really think that's the bigger story here than Conservative support going up and down.
Yeah, and you can see that. I mean, you're absolutely right. You can see that in the polls, right?
Yeah.
You see a direct correlation between the Liberals' trajectory rising and the NDP descending, and you see a little bit of blip with the Conservatives, but I think more of that support is coming from the NDP. Although, anecdotally, and this is like a survey of 5 or something, but have talked to a lot of my Liberal friends who definitely lean on the right side of the spectrum, who were not feeling the Trudeau Liberals in the last year, 12, 18, 24 months, who would have gone Conservative, who are intrigued enough to come back to the Liberal Party because of Carney. So I do think they'll take it from both sides, but I think that the NDP is really feeling the brunt of this trauma at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think they get it back. Like, I can't see a scenario where he suddenly ignites the imagination of Canadians around what he could be as the prime minister of this country. I just don't see it happening.
Totally fair, because Jagmeet came in as a really popular leader. He was like gauging young people. He was the TikTok leader. You'll remember he was deputy leader of the NDP provincially in Ontario. And then he kind of just fell flat. And this isn't really a Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau reaction. It's kind of been the story of Jagmeet Singh all along. He's never really had that fire in terms of engaging Canadians. And that's a big problem, I think, for the Conservatives, to be honest. That, to me, over the last few years has been a big sticking point in trying to get the NDP to do better, which will in turn pull votes from the Liberals and then help the Conservatives. But let's talk about the Conservatives for a second, because I don't know, but probably not you, but I'm getting a lot of people that are saying to me, oh my God, are the Conservatives going to lose this? I don't think that's the conversation that we need to be having right now. I don't think that we know. Like, campaigns are long. The Conservative Party has a lot of things going for it. One is money, great fundraising, great messaging. We've talked about it many times. I think the interesting thing right now is that we're in a real race for the first time in years. So I think I'm still rooting for the Tories, obviously, but I'm still not panicked.
The most shocking thing that Rachel has said on our podcast today.
I'm not panicking. Still, to all of those Tories listening, there's a long runway, even with a short election, which I think they're going to call 37 days, I believe, is the shortest they can do. We're looking at an April 28th or May 5th election day. If Mark Carney's listening, May 5th would work much better for my schedule. So I would appreciate that. But I think we have to see what the Conservatives roll out in terms of messaging, how they are going to frame Mark Carney, this unknown, untested leader. And I'm really interested and excited to see what comes out of the Tory camp over the next couple of weeks. I also will give a shout out to a lot of the Conservative candidates across the country who are really interesting, amazing people. And I think that storyline of who the Conservatives were able to attract for this election will also be a big one that we're going to hear over the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be fascinating and interesting as well to watch how the Conservatives pivot right now. As we know, they did such a good job of their communication, making this all about every grievance, all about Trudeau and the carbon tax. They were so successful that they eliminated both.
Yes.
But now what? And then now what?
That's such a good line.
Is the scary part, right? Because it's like, then they came out with their first ads on Carney, and their first ads were carbon tax Carney.
Right.
And
there's
the first
a lag.
thing that Carney did, right, as prime minister, was to shut down the carbon tax. So it's
some people are saying
territory.
He really is carbon tax Carney because that was his first move to get rid of the carbon tax.
That's funny. That's really funny.
Yeah.
But this is tricky because the Conservatives now, when you have this, and I'm fascinated by this from a communication standpoint because that's what I do in my day job. When you're so successful in determining the narrative and the agenda, and you've run on that almost exclusively for such a long time, and then you're required to pivot. And it seems to me, and you would know better because you're closer to it, they didn't have the plan B. Like, what is the plan B? And I think we're waiting to hear from them. And listen, I always give them credit for their comms. And I think it would be crazy to think that, they're not just going to lie down and let this one go by.
Right.
They'll have a plan B. We just haven't seen it yet.
But
so what will they go after?
I think most Canadians kind of feel that too, though. Like, did we ever think, even the two of us, did we ever think that we'd be in this current situation? No, of course not. So I think once Justin Trudeau stepped down and they started the leadership race, that really for the Tories was like, how do we pivot? Who's the new leader? How do we define him? And I think what you're going to see for the next couple of weeks, at least leading into the campaign, is who is Mark Carney? We're seeing a lot of that messaging, a lot of stuff about his own assets and his own roles within Brookfield. We're seeing pictures of him and his wife with the woman, what's her name, from Jeffrey Epstein's island, like whatever they could do. Maxwell, whatever her name is.
I forget her last
name. Is it Maxwell?
Listeners right now are yelling at us. They're
I
like,
know.
Why don't you know this?
I know, because we're not up on the Jeffrey Epstein lingo, but they're trying to paint him as this global guy that has a lot of these connections to questionable people. And so the question really is, I mean, the Tories are great at doing that. Will it stick with Canadians, or are Canadians truly in this moment of excitement about our own country and excitement about a new prime minister that isn't Justin Trudeau? And I think for me, that's the question. That's what we're going into this campaign wondering, what will stick with Canadians? And I think 3 weeks ago, we were in a different place than we are now.
We were.
Times are so turbulent that we don't have those answers.
No. So this will be one of the most exciting elections to watch. It's my prediction. We have talked about this as the Olympics of politics. We've talked about this as the Super Bowl of politics. It's all of those things and more. It's the Oscars
and
of
more.
It's the everything of politics.
It's the Tonys. It's the Golden Globes. It's
the Grammys. It's the everything. So if you're listening and you're like, I really, I like listening to this podcast because I like learning about, we are going to have so much fun.
Yes.
We're going to have a blast over the next 6 weeks because we're going to be talking about politics. We're going to talk about it almost daily, I think. Hey, Rachel,
should we make the announcement?
We're letting out that little.
Yeah, for our listeners, we will let them out. Okay, so make sure that you're subscribed to this pod because we are going to go daily whenever that campaign is called. We're anticipating next Sunday. So make sure that on your phone or however you listen to your podcast, you click subscribe so that every day you will get our new daily update on everything federal election so that you can come on this ride with us.
It's going to be short and sweet. So it's like you're going to get the little tidbit that you need.
That's right.
Going to, help you at the dinner table, have the fascinating conversations that you're going to be having. So we're going to give you like some short little tidbits to take you on your day. We hope that's helpful and welcome. Yes. And we can't wait to hear your feedback about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. Daily pods are a big slog, but we're in it. We're going to get through it. All right. We're going to leave it there for this week. That was a lot to unpack. That was really a lot to unpack. And I have no doubt that next week, Carney's going to Europe. We're expecting an election call. Next week will be just as wild. So make sure you come back and listen to that. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening. New episodes air every Friday.
Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and find us at beyondaballot.com.